Now, in Syria, 89 people have been killed in clashes between Druze militia and Bedouin fighters in the country's south, according to the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights. Israel has launched airstrikes in support of the Druze forces. It targeted government tanks which were sent to intervene in the fighting. Let's speak now to Makram Rabah, who's an assistant professor of history at the American University of Beirut and the author of various books about the Druze community. Welcome to Newsday. Just briefly tell us about the Druze in Syria. Just tell us who they are and their position within the country.
Good morning. The Druze are actually an heterodox sect of Islam, which are a founding group of the country. They reside in the east of the country, and as a minority, they have over and over voiced concern about the centralized nature of the new regime. And over the last 6 or 7 months, they have refused to disarm and to be incorporated officially into the new Sharia regime's military structure. So what we are saying at the moment is actually a continuation of an earlier clash which started between the Druze and the central authority. However, this recent confrontation started off was a somewhat of a typical confrontation between the Druze and their neighboring Bedouin tribes. This is a historic feud which goes back centuries. However, it was used as a pretext by the central government in order to intervene directly and try to disarm the Druze. And what we are seeing now is a continuation of this episode, basically.
And how large is the Druze fighting force? Is it clear?
Well, the Druze don't really have a centralized fighting force because not all factions agree with what's happening. What we are seeing right now is the confrontation between the forces which are commanded by one of the Druze clerics, the Sheikh al-Aql called al-Hajari. Al-Hajari has thousands of people fighting under him, but they are not really equipped compared to the centralized military forces. So we are talking about thousands of fighters with different militias. However, they cannot sustain a long-term fighting because at the end of the day, these people are local militias and their training and their air support is not that great. While the Druze of Syria do have the support of the Druze of Israel, the Netanyahu government
And support of the
has
Israeli military, it would seem.
Anyway, however, these strikes in Syria now are more or less of a token strikes because the Druze of Syria were hoping for a land invasion by Israel, which is not possible at the moment. Especially that everything is happening right now is happening on the heels of a meeting between Ahmad al-Shara and the Israelis and Azerbaijan, as well as Tom Barak's U.S. envoy's visit to the area, which says that they are not really in the business of endorsing minorities splitting from the central government. So what we are saying is a combination of regional and international and very local politics transpiring in Syria. However, it is happening on the blood of the innocent
You can see,
of the
though, why
Syrians.
the Druze fighters would feel emboldened when the Israeli defense minister says that Israel will not allow harm to come to the Druze in Syria.
Yes, but at the same time, they should be alarmed that they should not actually wage war and bet on external factions because at the end of the day, while the Netanyahu government might be vocal and supporting of the Druze, it's not sustainable on the long run. This doesn't mean that the Druze military institution doesn't want to save the Druze, but at the moment, regardless of what we hear, there's no existential threat against the Druze. And ultimately, Ahmad al-Shara, once he is able to disarm these local Druze factions, will have to play nice. So we are not looking at the kind of a genocide like some people are saying. Yet at the same time, the Sharia government has decided not to play politics, but rather to try to enforce itself by force, and then perhaps try to bring in the Druze in from the cold.
And if we put the Druze to one side, are there risks of sectarian unrest with other groups in the country?
Well, definitely what we are seeing now is part of a sectarian feud because, as I mentioned before, the fight started with a vegetable vendor that was assaulted by the local Bedouin Sunni tribes. This sectarian confrontation between the Sunnis and the Druze broke out and became a kind of a regional war. So ultimately there is, and I do believe that the Sharia government is trying to take advantage of historical sectarian tensions to try to say, given that this is something that has gotten out of hand, we have to intervene. And ironically, this is a technique which the former Assad regime has used for over 4 decades.
Thank you. Makram Rabah there, Assistant Professor of History at the American University of Beirut and author of various books on the Druze community, not just in Syria, but across the region. You're with Newsday on the BBC World Service.